Welcome everyone, I am Adesewa Josh and this is Africa Matters. We begin in Africa's Sahel region where rising attacks by armed insurgents has left thousands dead and millions displaced. And in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed returns from the front line after federal troops recaptured several key towns from Tigray rebels. And in Nigeria, an app developer is hoping to preserve endangered local languages using modern technology. West Africa's Sahel region continues to face security threats as armed groups ramp up attacks against government and civilian targets. The UN says an explosion on Wednesday in central Mali killed 7 peacekeepers and 3 others sustained severe injuries. On the same day in neighboring Burkina Faso, President Roch Kabore fired his prime minister and dissolved the government after a series of militant attacks sparked protests. And on Sunday, rebels attacked a military base in Niger, leaving scores of soldiers and civilians dead. At a security conference in Dakar on Monday, Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum said his army was outgunned by rebels who have more sophisticated weapons that were allegedly sourced from Libya.
Nowhere in the world have rebel groups ever had access to the same weapons as the legal forces they're fighting, as is the case in the Sahel today. I even think that for some weapons, the proportion among terrorists is higher than those held by the regular forces.
West Africa's Sahel was plunged into crisis nearly a decade ago following an armed conflict in Mali between the government and secessionist Tuareg rebels in the north. They signed a peace deal in 2015, but many of its key provisions were never implemented, including disarmament of former fighters. Al-Qaeda and Daesh-linked militant groups also set up base there and started expanding in the region. The UN says about 2,400 people were killed last year in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, making it the deadliest year on record. The Sahel, which stretches from Mauritania in the west to Eritrea in the east, is also facing an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, with more than 4.2 million people displaced from their homes. Large parts of the region are ungoverned, and people there face drought, poverty, and high unemployment. So far, peacekeeping and counter-terrorism efforts by the international community have failed to stop violent attacks in the region. This year, France announced they've begun withdrawing troops from Mali after 7 years of military intervention. UN peacekeeping forces have also become the target of regular attacks as they struggle to provide effective protection to civilians. Mali is now considering hiring the Wagner Group, a notorious Russian private military company that's been accused of human rights violations. It's a move many Western countries believe could backfire. Let's hear more from Cheta Wanze, lead researcher at SBM Intelligence. He joins me from Manchester, UK. Thank you so much for making our time. 8 years of multinational counterterrorism efforts have yielded very little progress in the Sahel. Why is fixing the region's security challenges so elusive?
Thank you for having me, Adesewa. First things first, I think it's important to put context here. The Sahel is a very large region. It's larger than continental Europe, in many larger than Russia, which is the largest country in the world. It spans from Mauritania to Ethiopia, and it is full of basically a lot of what we would call ungoverned spaces. This enables a lot of terror groups in the region to trade space for time.
Let me come in here and bring you back to the first question, which is why it's become so difficult to resolve the security challenges in the Sahel. And the reason I'm bringing you back to it is because we have all these multinational counterterrorism efforts. I mean, that goes way back more than a decade trying to resolve this problem. And yet it's gone from bad to worse if we have to face the facts. Are we missing something out here? Is there a strategy that isn't in play yet? What's really going on?
I think that that a lot of it is economic. It's the economy, to quote the Clinton campaign in the U.S. back then. It's the economy stupid. This region contains some of the poorest countries in the world, by a distance. And not only are they among the poorest countries in the world, Niger, for example, is absolutely, according to UNHCR, Human Development Index figures, the poorest country. And Niger has the fastest growing population in the world. So we have a toxic mix of countries that cannot take care of their citizens, but they're producing more citizens. That provides very fertile recruitment ground for all sorts of groups. Note that some of the most notable jihadi armed groups in the world operate in the Sahel. We have groups like the JNIM, we have Ansar al-Din, we have Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, we have Katibat Machina, Katibat Serma, Ansarul Islam. All these groups are there. There are a lot more. I've just named a few off the top of my head. There are a lot more groups. And they're basically competing for space, competing for access to resources, and competing to form proto-states.
Right.
So we are essentially seeing a lot of proto-state formation as the old colonial borders, which never made sense in the first place, are beginning to break down.
French troops are moving out of the region, or at least France announced the withdrawal, and it has started withdrawing some of its troops from the region. What are the pros and cons of that? And do you think Russia's Wagner military group can bring peace to the region, seeing they failed to deliver in Mozambique?
So I think the French withdrawal is a political issue based on elections in France. I think that after the elections, whether Macron continues in office or whether a new government is sworn in, I think that France will continue to be a player in the region. Contrary to what many think, Russia's involvement in Africa goes back a long time. Much of it has been motivated by three reasons, at least. First, to gain a strong presence on the continent. Second, to counter and, where possible, undermine Western Europe and, by extension, NATO's influence. And third, to have an influence of its own in African issues. The Russians are coming back. The big thing that the Russians have to sell is security. And that's where the Wagner group comes in.
So, Cheta, what exactly will it take to fix the issues in the Sahel?
It's the economy. Basically, the moment we can get, and in my view, city-states to begin to work in the region and suck people out of poverty, then we'll begin to see a reduction in security challenges. But as long as we have a very large and growing group of people without anything to do, then we will continue to see security challenges.
Thank you so much, Cheta Nwanze, lead researcher at SBM Intelligence. Thanks for your thoughts on Africa Matters.
Thank you for having me.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he has returned to the capital, Addis Ababa. He'd recently joined federal troops on the front lines as they battled against rebel groups advancing from the northern Tigray region. The government says their forces recaptured several key areas, while Tigrayan fighters insist they strategically withdrew. Claire Heriot has more.
A convoy of what's thought to be Ethiopian military in the Amhara region. The government says it has recaptured the towns of Dessie and Kombolcha from forces aligned with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF.
The national forces continue to apprehend TPLF fighters in great numbers, with many also heeding the call that had been extended earlier this week to surrender, and therefore heeding the call and surrendering to the defense forces. With a lot of these towns coming under the National Defense Forces, it is inevitable that there would be a lot of destruction.
And this war has been destructive. Tens of thousands of people have been killed since it began just over a year ago. More than 27,000 refugees are in neighbouring Sudan, and the UN says 2.1 million people have been displaced. The Ethiopian Prime Minister, Nobel Peace Prize winning Abiy Ahmed, has reportedly visited the front line.
The accomplished victory is unbelievable. We are very proud of the National Defense Ministry. We are proud of our people.
The TPLF disputes the government's version of events, a spokesperson tweeting, "We left North Shoa, Kombolcha and Dessie as part of our plan. There was no organised unit to liberate these towns, and the residents know it, and Abiy's generals know it. Things are going according to our plan. The rest is just a circus. As we always say, Tigray shall prevail." The war appears to be entering a dangerous new phase with civilian volunteers enlisting on both sides. Untrained militias lacking formal structure and chains of command potentially increase the risk of human rights abuses. Attempts by the African Union to broker a ceasefire have yet to yield results. The conflict risks history repeating itself as 21st century Ethiopia begins to resemble the war-torn, famine-afflicted country of the 1980s. Claire Herriot, Africa Matters.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including...
I'll show you how a new technology in Abuja is helping children in Nigeria learn and preserve their local languages.
In Nigeria, up to 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines are estimated to have expired before they could be used last month. The health minister says officials only had weeks to administer the shots donated by Western countries before their expiry date. Africa lags behind the rest of the world in inoculation rates, with less than 8% of the continent's population receiving both jabs. Vaccine hesitancy is the most common cause. But as Natasha Hussein reports, there are also many challenges behind the scenes.
Gerald Yale works at a clinic in Kenya's Narok County. People have been flocking to his clinic to receive their COVID-19 shots. But recently, he had to turn them away.
We do not have a COVID vaccine now. We've run out of stock 5 days ago. We have already ordered our supply again, so we expect to receive our supply in 2 days' time.
In reality, Narok County is not short of jabs. Nearly 14,000 doses sit in a fridge in the nearest town, which is only 115 kilometers away. But the refrigerated trucks required to transport them are expensive, and the clinic has only one fridge suitable for storage.
We have our ice packs here. We usually keep them in the fridge, and when they require the requisite temperature, we are able to stock them here and to make sure that the vaccine is cool, and then we do the vaccination from here.
Logistical challenges are one of many faced by African countries. Sometimes donor countries send them batches of vaccines that are on the verge of expiry. Many are sent back because they can't be administered in time, and thousands of unusable doses have been destroyed.
Now, I have personally really been disappointed in the approach that the rich countries have taken on the issue of vaccines. Firstly, they hoarded vaccines. They ordered more vaccines than their populations required. And when we wanted vaccines, they just kept, giving us the crumbs from their table. And the greed that they demonstrated is something that is quite disappointing indeed, particularly when they say they are our partners.
And the lack of vaccines has been a further deterrent for those who were already hesitant. Julius Tuyoto is a herder in Narok. He says he could be persuaded if someone explained the importance of vaccines in person.
There was a time I went to Narok County Referral Hospital myself, just out of curiosity to see if there was a vaccine. I met a lot of people, but while we were standing there, we were told that vaccine was over. So I was discharged and was not interested in following up again.
Successful child vaccination campaigns show that African populations can overcome their skepticism of Western vaccines. But with export bans and vaccine hoarding making access even more difficult, hesitancy is only one of a host of problems facing the continent. Natasha Hussein, Africa Matters.
A week after the discovery of the new COVID-19 variant known as Omicron, South Africa has ramped up its response with vaccination pop-up sites at shopping centers and transportation hubs. But even as jabs become more widely available, the pace of inoculations has slowed. And in order to get through to people who still have doubts, a new campaign has been launched by the funeral home industry. Sarah Balter has more.
Undertakers in Soweto, South Africa, are used to seeing the dead. But a spike in coronavirus deaths brought on by a fourth wave has funeral directors hoping to see less of their fellow Sowetans at the office.
It's too much. We're paying too many people. So we're asking people to go and vaccinate so that the chances of you succumbing to death due to COVID are very minimal.
They're calling on people who shun the jab to ignore rumors that could put them in the grave, like Brian Makubane.
I just heard some rumors about vaccination, that after getting vaccination, you get infected, you die from vaccination. So that's the reason why I'm not yet went to do vaccination.
Gauteng province, which includes Soweto, is a COVID-19 hotspot with more than 70% of new cases in the country. Undertakers say they're struggling with the sheer number of fatalities and can't guarantee quality services. Lockdowns have made it hard for families to pay for funerals.
In one family, we'll bury one this week, one next week, one after 3 days. In one family, you bury 3 times or second time. Obviously, they become stretched in terms of affordability and to pay the funeral.
Only around 40% of South Africans are fully vaccinated. Undertakers say they want to see that number rise to at least 90. While burying the dead is their stock in trade, they'd rather see people living. Sarah Balter, Africa Matters.
For years, experts have raised the alarm about the world's disappearing languages. There are more than 7,000 languages spoken on the planet today, and up to 50% are at risk of disappearing within the next century. In Nigeria, Chizera Muchiaga is trying to preserve some of the country's 400 native dialects with a little help from modern technology. Polom David reports.
What does that mean? Beautiful. Ifeoma Azogu is teaching her sons Igbo, one of the 3 most spoken languages in Nigeria. She is doing this with the aid of the Mavis talking pen and book. Azogu runs a language and culture hub in Abuja, and she insists that the children there be able to speak at least 2 Nigerian languages.
I decided that I think they need to learn our language so that when we're in other public places that are Western and otherwise, we can actually speak to them a bit privately.
Azogu's 15-year-old son is determined to learn his local dialect so he can become more familiar with his own culture and his traditions.
When I go to my village at the end of the year, I normally don't interact with my people well. They normally look at me as the boy who doesn't even know how to speak his language. They just look at that boy, even his parents, what are they doing? They're not teaching him properly. And I didn't feel very nice or communicated with, so I tried to take it upon myself to learn my language.
Language experts say some of the more than 400 languages in Nigeria, including Igbo and Yoruba, could completely disappear within the next 50 years unless something is done to keep them alive.
Chizera Muchiaga is an electronics engineer who is actively working to save some of Nigeria's dying languages. His company produces the Mavis talking pen and books that children are using to learn a new language.
A lot of kids don't speak the local language, and they travel, they can't communicate with people at home. Even in the family, there are sometimes parents want to speak to them in their local dialect for certain reasons, and the kids are lost, both kids here and especially kids in the diaspora. So what we decided to do was to use technology to fix that, because you could have a very good language teacher, but that teacher can't go house to house to teach everybody in the country or abroad. So but with technology, you can replicate that. So that's why we made the pen and books.
Uchiaga says his company has produced 6,000 copies of the books and pens, and they've all sold out. It takes about 1 month to digitize a language, and his company is looking for funding to be able to do more of it. Chizera Muchiaga and Mavis Computel's vision is to digitize more and more languages both in Nigeria and across Africa so that children, including Azogu's son Chuma, can be part of keeping their languages, cultures and traditions alive for generations to come. Palum David, Africa Matters, Abuja.
You're watching Africa Matters, and here's a roundup of other stories making news across the continent. The United States has returned a collection of more than 920 stolen artifacts to Mali. The archaeological and ethnographic objects were handed over to the Prime Minister at a ceremony in the capital Bamako. The items were first discovered in 2009 and were then handed to anthropologists to determine their authenticity. Among the relics are flagstones and axe heads dating back to the Neolithic era. The Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the fastest growing economies in Africa, with GDP estimated increase by about 5.4% this year and 6.4% in 2020. That's according to the head of the International Monetary Fund, who described the country as a bright spot in Africa in terms of economic performance. Kristalina Georgieva said government reforms and high commodity prices have improved the country's fortunes. The DRC is Africa's top producer of copper and the world's leading cobalt miner. Tanzania is celebrating 60 years of independence from German and British colonial rule. In that time, the country has avoided much of the political instability of its neighboring countries. Its government recently renegotiated the terms of long-standing mining contracts deemed unfavorable to the country and won a tax dispute with a major Western mining conglomerate. President Samia Suluhu Hassan also made history when she was sworn in as the country's first female president this year. And another Tanzanian who is making his mark is Nobel Literature Prize winner Abdulrazak Gurnah. He fled to Britain more than 50 years ago and is just the second non-white writer from sub-Saharan Africa to win the prestigious award. Critics have praised his novels for focusing on the effects of colonialism and the fate of refugees. While accepting the award, he slammed the UK government for its approach to refugees.
It's as if they have had no experience of refugees. It's as if this is a new thing that hasn't happened before. When Europe, of course, let alone other ages, but Europe over the last 50 or 60 years or so, or more, maybe 70 years, has had experience of wave after wave of refugees who have turned out to be major contributors to the societies that has received them, important contributors.
Two Nigerian designers and entrepreneurs are working to promote their country's culture and traditions in their jewelry shops in Lagos. They are replicating famous African artifacts as glamorous accessories as a way to celebrate their heritage. Kubra Akoch reports.
Abdulmalik Obaseki is looking for accessories that can show off his Nigerian roots, and he's come to the right place.
Every piece they make has tradition to it. It's not just wearing pieces, but it's wearing pieces that mean something. I am from Edo. My dad is Edo, and my mom is Hausa, and that's what this is right here. So it's the Edo and Hausa piece.
Founded by Tosan Ide and Tuoya Dudu, ITSK Gold produces fashion accessories that represent Nigerian heritage. They replicate cultural artifacts, including the famous Benin bronzes, to create jewelry pieces like gold and silver rings and bracelets.
This right here is the Queen Idia beaded bracelet collection. That's what I'm trying to put together. So it has the stopper, ITSK stopper, which is plated with 18-karat gold, and it comes with matte beads.
Idia was a 16th century queen mother from the Kingdom of Benin. The Queen Idia mask is among thousands of artifacts stolen by British troops from the Benin Palace in the late 1890s. It featured on the company's first ever piece, which remains its bestseller.
What we really want to do is provide real value, not mass produce. The value in gold, the value in silver, the value in precious stones and gemstones is what we want to use to uphold the brand. That is true Africa.
Prices start at $31, and the company has sold more than 12,000 accessories. Its founders hope their jewelry will be passed down the generations and treasured for decades to come. Kubra Akoch, Africa Matters.
Our Africa City profile this week is the Luwero district in central Uganda, East Africa. That's our show this week. Don't forget to share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle at Adesewa Josh. We'll leave you with these images from across the continent.